Hi everybody, I'm Mayra here with That Hashtag Show to bring you everything Disney. And today we're going to be taking you to an adventure to Van Eaton's Collectibles, where they'll be auctioning off memorabilia from 1959 to present day. So come join me and let's check it all out. I'm here with Mike, who is actually hosting the auction that will be taking place here on February 28th to March 1st. So tell us a little bit what's going on, what everybody should be expecting out of this event.
Well, I don't even know what to expect out of this event. It's going to be off the hook, I hope. We'll see what happens, but we're actually pitching a tent out in the back parking lot, and we hope a lot of people will come down and participate in the auction and just enjoy it. We have a lot going on. The restaurants near us are participating also, so it should be a fun day, both days.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit of how this collection even came to be.
Well, the collector has been collecting for about 30 years. Now, he's an artist. He was really into the people who built the park and why they built the park and what influenced them. So when he started collecting, rather than like me or most collectors who just collect a piece, like we collect like the Haunted Mansion or we collect pirates, right? He said, I want the whole park. I want to know everything about it. So he did a lot of research. He met a lot of people, and he dug up some amazing pieces. So this collection sort of encompasses everything, and that's what I like about it. From concepts when they were building it, from blueprints early on, all the way through Disneyland, the World's Fair, which was a very important part of Disneyland history, and then on to Disney World and Epcot. It's pretty amazing.
Awesome. I hear some of the items here as well. One of the outfits was worn by Betty Taylor.
Betty Taylor, he was a big fan of Betty Taylor in the Golden Horseshoe. He actually went to her and said, hey, I would like your costumes. And not just one costume, but like 4 or 5 of her major costumes. She was Slewfoot Sue for 30 years at the Golden Horseshoe. And then he has some of her personal effects, like her song portfolio, the stuff that she used back then, some of the early albums they did at the Golden Horseshoe, things like that. It's pretty cool.
Awesome. I see also this blueprint right here. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Oh yeah, this is cool. Blueprints are hard. These are called brown lines, and they fade. So it's very hard to find one in such great shape because they weren't made to last. They were only to be used when they were building the park. This is about 5 months before the park was built, and although most of the park is there, you can still see them experimenting with a lot of different things that didn't quite make it. Like in Fantasyland, they had an archery range. And in Frontierland here, they had an open skeet range, which I just can't imagine ever happening. But, it was just ideas. So 5 months before the park, they're still working with it, still trying to figure out what's going to work. It's a pretty amazing piece.
That's awesome. I also see over here there's a map as well that you can tell us a little bit detail on that, because I've been going to Disneyland since maybe, 90s. But still, there's some things on there that I see that I couldn't even imagine them being there.
They're not even there now.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That map. That's the first large map. Those big maps that you see, those big fold-out maps. They started making those in 1958, and that's one of the first ones. But they had to make those maps with what they were planning on in the future, like the next year. 1959 was a big year for Disneyland. They opened the Matterhorn, they opened the submarine, some of the bigger rides were opening at that time, and they're included on that map. But there's also pieces they were planning, like an area called Edison Square and things like that actually never made it into the park by 59. This particular map is extremely rare because it wasn't a folded one. It was a giveaway that was rolled, and it was given away by a radio station that was housed at the Disneyland Hotel in 1958. It's a pretty cool map.
That's awesome. Let's go check it out really quick.
This is, I think, cool too. See, this is Haunted House, right? This is 1958, but they're planning. They made this map to plan what's going to happen, but they were already planting what became the Haunted Mansion in 58, but it didn't open for another 10 years. I mean, this was there a long time, and it went through a lot of different stages. A wax museum.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't know if that was there or not, to be quite honest with you. I know this was the chicken plantation, but so many different things. And as I was telling you, you can see Main Street right here. This is the Main Street we know. They were planning a whole break off over here, Liberty Square, Edison Square, all this, and a break off over here that never happened. But again, 58, they're showing you what's going to happen in 59. This was before the Matterhorn was built, but they went ahead and put it in. It was before the monorail was running, but they went ahead and put it in. with the red train, which is the panel we have over there is off of that exact train. So they had a heliport at the time, which is really cool. And as I was telling you earlier, in the first year of the park, before the Matterhorn, this was called Holiday Hill, they had a circus tent, and they had a show called the Mickey Mouse Club Circus. And this starred the Mouseketeers, and actually their parents too. A lot of their parents performed with their kids in that show. And it turned out to be just a disaster. It was not very popular because the reason you came to Disneyland was to see stuff you'd never seen before. And a circus was like, oh, you know, I've been to a circus. So nobody really went to it. There was an extra admission to get in, and so it wasn't that good. In fact, at one point, I heard a camel escaped and ran down Main Street. They just had all sorts of problems with it. So they took it out. But they had performers, a lion tamer, some clowns, other things that were under contract for more than just, I mean, that only lasted like 6 months. So they actually built Holidayland, which is over here. It was a picnic area. It was a place where you could take your kids and relax and get away from the crowds. But at the same time, this is where they would have the performers that were under contract for the old show play out their contracts. And that, I don't think that made it past 58 or 59. So by the time this map was going, this was probably gone, or really close to being gone. They had a heliport, and there was a Los Angeles Airlines had a helicopter service from LAX, and you could fly over to Anaheim, all the way to Anaheim, and land here and go see Disneyland. And that lasted for a few years, but the helicopters had a pretty bad safety record, and eventually that went away too. So this map has a lot of history to it, and it's an extremely rare map because it was a giveaway by KEZY Radio, who was at the Disneyland Hotel. It was never folded. It was given away rolled. We see very few of these, and that makes it probably the rarest of the Disneyland maps.
I also heard a rumor of Walt Disney actually living at the park. Would that happen to be true? And would you know where?
Sure, he had an apartment. Absolutely, he had an apartment right over the firehouse, I believe, right here on Main Street. That was where he would just go and he would relax and that's it. Oh yeah, he always had an apartment on Main Street. When they first built the park, there was a gazebo here instead of this flag, but he felt it interfered with your view of the castle, so he took that out and put the flagpole in. But the park was constantly changing, and like I say, this is right before 58. 59 was a huge year. In fact, they called it the grand reopening. That's when all this area over here opened up, the Matterhorn, the submarines. It was a big time for Disney. So this is pretty cool. In fact, this is one of my favorite pieces. This is a concept for Tomorrowland, done by a guy named Bruce Bushman. He was a big Imagineer. We did a lot of concepts for Disneyland. What makes this really special is there was a Disneyland TV show that Walt Disney had on ABC television back in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And on that show, that's where he announced, hey, I'm going to be building this park, you know, and it's going to have these lands in it. And when he introduced Tomorrowland, this is what he showed the world. So this is like your first view of Tomorrowland for the world. And it's so like Buck Rogers futuristic, and it's got this cool looking monorail thing way before they ever planned the monorail, but just a very early concept. And because it was on that TV show and because it was picked out by Disney to be shown at that time, I think it's a really special piece. He showed one for each land by Bruce Bushman. 3 of them, or the other 3, are in the archives. This is the only one. This was held by his wife, Bushman's wife, and eventually this collector got it from the family. It's a pretty amazing piece. Yeah.
And then also see behind me.
Yeah, aren't those cool? Well, you know, now the World's Fair was a big part of Disneyland history because Walt wanted new rides at Disneyland, and so you know, I got to find sponsors to do this. So what he did was he went to like sponsors and said, hey GE, you know, we can build this ride for you for the World's Fair, and then after it we'll bring it to Disneyland and you can sponsor it there. And he got some great sponsors, and that's why they built the small world. These dolls are very early. They're from the World's Fair. The costumes have been recreated, but the dolls themselves are some of the background dolls that didn't have to have moving mouths and blinking eyes, but they did have some movement in them. And there's a little access panel on their rear ends where you would get in where the animatronics would be to move maybe an arm here or something like that. But they're pretty cool. Once they got to Disneyland, a lot of the dolls were modified. They gave all of them like a different kind of eyeball, blinking eyes. Right. And what we think happened, at least according to the research we got, is these dolls eventually became test dolls for costumes. And that's why you see 2 colors here on his arms, was so they could test color of the costume against the doll and for lighting and such like that. So that's pretty cool. And you know, these are really amazing too, since you're right here. If you go to the Snow White ride, there's a mural, and these are the paintings for that mural, done by a guy named Paul Hartley, who worked under a guy named Ivan Durrell, who did all the backgrounds and styling for Sleeping Beauty later on. But they're actually beautiful, beautiful paintings, and we have pictures of him taking these paintings and standing in front of the Snow White ride, painting the murals, using these as reference. And I think those are really cool.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And out of all the items here, just standing here, what would you say is the oldest piece that you have?
Wow. Well, the oldest piece in this auction is a little miniature potbelly stove that this guy, the collector, got because Walt Disney was really influenced by miniatures and by trains. And he had a train in his backyard. So he built and cast a little potbelly stove miniature to put into the caboose of his miniature trains. And he had so much fun doing that he started to make more. It was like a hobby, sort of, I guess, during the stress of all the work. He'd come home and he would make these little potbelly stoves. He'd hand paint them, cast them, everything. And so just for fun, he sent some to a store in New York that sold miniatures, and they actually sold about 100 of these. I've never seen, there's 2 of them I've seen. They're both at the Walt Disney Museum up north in San Francisco. This is the only other one I've seen. All hand painted by Walt, all cast. And the collector's feeling was, hey, this is one of the influences. You know, when he built the park, this attention to detail, the wonder of trains and miniatures, all that came into the park at some point in time, and that's why it's part of this collection. Now, this painting is by an Imagineer named Sam McKim. And what Disney did, this is very early on now, they're still building the park. He said, well, Main Street should be like any Main Street. It should have stores. And so he went to different companies and said, hey, would you like to be a store on our Main Street? And to pitch them, he would send them a painting of what their store would look like. So this was for the Kodak store that actually was on Main Street. He sent this painting to Kodak and pitched them, say, hey, you can be a part of this, what we're building over there. Well, Kodak, of course, said, yeah, we'll do it, you know. And the collector actually got this from the Kodak archives. It never made it back to Disney. He actually found it in the Kodak archives. And so it's a really great look at how Walt was pitching people and how he got all these sponsors. I mean, there were tons of them on Main Street. Main Street was all individual stores, not like it is today where it's all, you know, one giant Disney store. Here, there was a Wurlitzer organ place, Upjohn Vitamins. Everybody had a store on Main Street. In fact, the Kodak franchise was owned by a television star named Art Linkletter, who was actually the host of the opening day when they had their opening day, and he made a lot of money owning the Kodak franchise at Disneyland.
And I see this cute little guy here. Tell us a little bit about him.
This is a Tiki bird from the Tiki room at Disneyland. What makes him special, or her, I think it's a her, what makes her special is that usually when they take them out of the ride or out of the attraction, they retain all the insides, all the working mechanisms, because they can use them for something else. Well, this one still has all the working mechanisms in it, so it's extremely rare. And the Tiki room was a very unique part of Disneyland. For one thing, when Disney was building it, this whole audio animatronic thing, he needed tons of computers, tons of space. They actually had to air condition. It was the first air-conditioned building at Disneyland because they had to keep everything cool, all the computers that were running these. Every bird had its own, like, reel-to-reel computer to make it operate, and it all had to be synced. It used a huge amount of room. And because there was so much red tape in getting this built at Disneyland and so much work that Walt said, you know, just forget about it. I'm going to build this myself. So what he did was he used his company Retlaw, which is Walter spelled backwards, and he built this and owned it himself. So he rented land from Disneyland, in Disneyland, and then they had to charge a separate admission ticket to come to see the Tiki room. This was like 75 cents. This is when admission to the park was like $1.50. You had to pay another 75 cents to get into the Tiki room. But hey, they had air conditioning, so I think it was worth it. And for years, it was just Walt's baby. And then finally, they got a sponsor. United Airlines came in as a sponsor. But in the beginning, it was all Walt. Separate tickets so they could keep the accounting right and everything. So it's cool.
Compared to the prices now, though, I bet they would.
Yeah, it's still a deal. Nobody complained. That's right. Yeah, exactly. You're right. You got that.
Right. And here's another interesting piece. How about you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. This is when Disney decided to build the park in Florida. They bought a big swath, big piece of land down there. He wasn't really there to build a park. His idea was to build a futuristic community. And so they were planning this community. They kept everything really secret, and they had a war room. I call it a war room, where they had pictures like this up on the wall. In fact, this is from that room, where it shows sort of what they're designing. It's and you can see his idea here. It's pretty amazing. There he has a regional airport. an entrance, and that thing that's Epcot up there is actually this giant community where you would live and where you would work, and it would have monorails running all through it. There was an area over there you see more residential, more municipal, and industrial park. It was supposed to be what a community, a futuristic community was going to be at the time. And if you look up in the top corner, you'll see a little bitty theme park up there. The idea was that would finance the building of the rest of this. So that was the first part of it they built, but then Walt died, and although they tried to continue, Epcot was still going to be that community as things progressed. They said, well, we really can't afford to do that, and everything changed and it became a giant theme park instead. But this is his original idea for what he wanted in Florida. It's pretty substantial and pretty amazing when you look at it.
So this is one of my favorite rides at Disneyland, which is the Haunted Mansion. Is there anything interesting that you could tell us about these little items right here?
Sure. There's some really cool pieces here. This is a very unusual piece. In fact, this is the only one of its kind known to exist, and there's been write-ups all over the place. It was in a couple books. All this is an employee poster announcing the opening for employees to go ride this ride before it opened for the park. Very unusual poster. The collector found this in an ex-employee's bedroom hanging on the wall. You can actually see where the thumbtacks were. And again, it's the only one known to exist. But for me, again, what's cool about this collection and about Disneyland in general is that in the beginning, at this time period, Disney didn't just send stuff off to, overseas to be made. He went and found local artisans to make things for the park. And one of those things were the skulls and the tombstones that you saw at the Haunted Mansion. They were made by a family, a husband and wife, called Randotti's. There's one right here, a small one right here. And these are like plaster cast skulls. And Walt Disney found them. They lived in Anaheim and said, hey, could you make these for us? And we'll put them in our park. In the beginning, in the 50s, you'd find them in the Magic Shop. Then you'd find them at the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Then at the Haunted Mansion. And this family, this husband and wife, made a living their whole lives just from Disneyland, making these skulls and making these tombstones. That's all they did. It was a really cool thing. And you'll find that with a lot of the pieces in this collection. They're made by small companies, individuals who just became part of the park's history. That's a part of the history that's no longer there. So I think those are really a special part of it.
Right. I think that's one neat thing that I thought of the whole thing, that a little piece of everything in Disneyland was made by an artist. So.
Absolutely. In fact, part of the reason the guy collected these things, down to the popcorn boxes and the cups. I said, well, why would you collect a popcorn box? What's the use of that? He says, well, because it was designed by an artist at the studio. They didn't just go out and buy popcorn boxes. They said, we're going to make a popcorn box. Let's put the graphics on it that mean something. Let's put the artwork on it that shows that it's from Disneyland. And that's what they did. Shopping bags, everything. And all that's part of this collection.
Awesome. And then I see this guy over here, and I know that's a lot of people's favorite ride as well, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, it's my favorite ride, I think. Well, they're all my favorite ride. What am I saying? But yeah, this is an amazing piece because this is one of the most famous pieces. When you're riding through that ride, you always see that skeleton, drinking the wine. And this is the original one that was in the ride. It was taken out probably in the first 5 or 6 years of the ride, and it's the only piece I've ever seen come out of that ride like this. This is a substantial piece and probably one of the highlights of the collection.
Hope you guys had fun, because I sure did. If you liked everything that we showed you today, then you should come on down, because there's way much more to see. Also, they sell this cool catalog here at the gallery if you make it. If not, you can check it out online as well. Other than that, it's here till March 1st at Van Eaton's Gallery here in LA. Thank you. See you guys next time.